for the roundtable, which was venues and spaces in Australia. Simple to have a 15-minute discussion about that. I felt really disappointed because I guess the notion of a venue to me, and I work for an organisation that is based at an arts centre in Sydney. We're based at Carriageworks, but we also work site-specifically and across a whole range of different kinds of spaces. Our motto is every space is a performance space. So for me, just the term venue has a kind of slightly sort of daggy resonance to it, and this idea of a kind of a venue as being a sort of passive receptacle for a work that's fed to a passive or mollified audience and that doesn't have a kind of cultural context or critical dialogue around it. That was, those were the things that were going through my mind, but through the discussions, not only at my roundtable, but I think through the whole IETM meeting, the tendency that I'm hearing and that I'm greatly encouraged by is, you know, a sort of resistance to that idea, both from artists and from producers, and thankfully our funding bodies responding to that as well, that the idea, especially in a network like this, which is an international network, is not about selling product or touring product around between spaces or this kind of idea of a commodified work that is to be consumed, but art practice being a set of relationships and a set of negotiations and a set of understandings between individuals of which you can have a more in-depth, revelatory, kind of transformative experience, and that we need to think about both the way that we make art and the way that we produce it in order to deepen that dialogue and make those connections more apparent and more complex, and to sort of revel in that complexity. And I think that's reflected in the spirit of the form of IETM itself, in that it's an informal dialogue. Some of my best interactions, as they always do, happened on the dance floor last night, and also how lucky we are to have an arts council that acknowledges the value of that kind of dialogue and that supports meetings like this. So I guess, you know, really props to the Australia Council for making this happen, and hopefully, you know, you'll help us all to keep losing our virginity for years to come.
Bravo. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks very much, Jeff. Now, for those of you who are not Australians, just a little bit of verbal advice. There is a word that Jeff used called daggy. Daggy. For those of you who don't know, you've got to think of a sheep, sheep, and the bit of wool that goes over its bum at the end, that gets a bit shitty sometimes. That's called a dag, all right? But if somebody calls you a dag, it's all right, because we sometimes use it really affectionately. You can say, oh, you're a real dag, and nobody minds at all. It's great. So when he says something is daggy, it's just a little bit shitty on the end, all right? That's what he means. We're a wonderful culture, I must say.